If they're going to do it, then the 10% that they've just been ordered should be scrapped.
Yep.
And it should be scrapped until further notice.
Totally agree with you. We might put that to MPs as and when we speak to them through the course of the day. Just a couple of emails on this subject. Penny and Henley on Thames. Surely it's not too late to scrap absurd HS2 to save billions of pounds. Craig in Bury, I've not had a pay increase since 2010. I've not had a day off in this pandemic. You don't tell me what you do, sir. But we now need to do our bit to balance the books of this country. And I say again, and I really want it limited, the fact that these people have done the sterling job that they've done to get us through this situation, where many people have not had any income for months, maybe just for 1 year of freeze. Thanks for your call. More on that in a moment. Shall we talk to the economic aspect of this and this growing sense of rebellion? And credit to these rebellious Conservative MPs. A number of backbenchers saying they are not minded to support the Prime Minister with new tiers unless they can see fundamental economic data that shows that these tiers or lockdowns are working. Steve Baker is Conservative MP for Wickham, former Brexit Minister, and is Deputy Chairman of the recently formed CRG, that's the COVID Recovery Group. Mr Baker, what would the PM or one of his colleagues need to spell out? Good morning.
Well, good morning. Well, I'm very encouraged that they've already, I think, said that they're going to end the 10 p.m. curfew. We need to resume outside school, end forever, I think, the closure of non-essential retail, gyms, personal care, the restrictions on worship need to end. All these things where it's not at all clear that they closing them, restricting them, it's not at all clear that contributes to stopping the transmission of COVID. And we want to see that whatever measure is introduced saves more lives than it costs. And we think these are very moderate and reasonable answers.
How disappointed, concerned, how do you respond to the fact that the Prime Minister takes advice from chief scientific advisors, chief medical advisors, but we don't seem to have an equivalent in the world of economics, a chief economic advisor when it comes to talking tiers or lockdowns, Mr Baker?
Well, I've said repeatedly that we should have competitive, multidisciplinary teams providing advice on this pandemic so that scientists are exposed to the economic consequences of the recommendations they make. I think it's a fundamental problem that we've put science on a pedestal and said that there's one view of the science, when anyone with social media at their disposal can see that scientists disagree about the interpretation of what is slightly uncertain data. So competitive, multidisciplinary expert advice with red teams to challenge it is what we should be having, and then the Prime Minister would have options, and perhaps in future he wouldn't be bound to enter a major decision like this on the basis of modelling which turns out to be quite wrong.
And you and your colleagues on the CRG, you would actually possibly not support the PM were he not to heed this request.
But I think it is very reasonable to say that restrictions on people's fundamental liberties need to be shown to be necessary and proportionate, and that's what we're asking for. So it is possible that people will rebel against these measures, but there's no question of the Prime Minister's policy being changed through rebellions, because Labour are missing in action on civil liberties, and they will vote for authoritarian measures, provided they seem to produce safety in the short run for one group.
I'll let you go, Mr Baker. I must get a word from you. You will possibly have had sight of the front pages or picked up on the conversation. There is possible talk of a public sector strike over what may be, and we don't even know yet, later this week from your colleague Rishi Sunak, a pay freeze. This comes at the same time as you and your colleagues are due to receive a £3,300 pay rise. Mr Baker, it's an ugly look, isn't it?
It is an ugly look, and I've already said on Twitter that MPs should certainly have a pay freeze, even if it means legislating to take from IPSA their independence on these matters. And I did listen to the gentleman earlier. I'm afraid, I hope your listeners won't mind me saying, I'm so sick of the situation being mischaracterised. I have never had a slam-up dinner at taxpayer expense, other than the extent to which I'm paid by the taxpayer. But, I am really parsimonious in my use of expenses. It's not normally expenses in the sense that people would consider them. It's things like employing staff and staff having reasonable costs and having paper in the office and, a computer on my desk in the office. My computer at home is paid for by me. I really am parsimonious. I think most of my colleagues are. And some of the things which people believe about our expenses are simply untrue.
We'll leave it there, Steve Baker. Thank you. And messages, I'm not cutting you because of that. Message is taken on board, Conservative MP for Wickham, Deputy Chairman of the CRG COVID Recovery Group. We'll go to news a minute later. I want Robert in Ipswich. The idea of a public sector pay freeze. Where are you on that possibility? Robert, good morning.
Yeah, I think there should be
of course, more of your comments on this 7:31. You'll listen to Breakfast with me, Nick Ferrara, here on LBC News Time Sunday.
New data shows the coronavirus vaccine developed by Oxford University can prevent 70% of people from getting COVID-19. The results from its phase 3 trial come from combining 2 doses. The first was 90% effective and the second was 62%. Boris Johnson's due to reveal the details of the new tiered system of coronavirus restrictions in England, replacing the national lockdown. It's understood all shops and gyms will be allowed to reopen, but there'll still be some limits on pubs and restaurants. Close contacts of people who've contracted COVID-19 may no longer have to self-isolate under new plans. The government's to trial repeat daily testing, with people only having to self-isolate if they test positive themselves. And the weather, wet and windy for northwestern areas, patchy rain in some other western parts, but mostly dry with some brightness elsewhere after early fog clears, a high of 12 degrees.
Eddie Mayor on LBC. You say he doesn't stand for anything, that he says whatever the people in front of him want to hear. Doesn't that suggest he might very well be a politician who's capable of resetting? If your analysis is right and he doesn't believe in anything, then maybe from today he'll believe in something different from what he believed last week when Dominic Cummings was there. So he is capable of reset. Eddie Mayor, this afternoon from 4, LBC.
At Market Finance, we've helped businesses with over £2 billion in funding since 2011, and we are accredited for the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme. Applying is short and simple. There are no obligations or hidden fees and nothing to pay for 12 months, which means we could help you get the funds you need quickly so you can get back to running your business. Applications are now open. Visit marketfinance.com to apply. T's and C's apply.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere. Delivery.
Oh, great. Can you leave it round the back, please?
Sure, no problem. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with a Ring Video Doorbell. For great Black Friday savings on selected devices, go to ring.com and major retailers today.
Busted boiler on a freezing day. Typical. Now we're spending more time at home. So before that happens, get a quote from British Gas on a new one. Spread the cost interest-free over 2 years and get £150 off or £350 off if you're an existing home care customer. And of course, we'll follow social distancing guidelines. Offer ends on the 30th of November. British Gas, here to solve. Search British Gas new boiler. Conditions apply. British Gas New Heating Limited is a credit broker and uses a panel of lenders.
To help clean up London's air, the ultra-low emission zone is expanding from central London up to the North Circular and down to the South Circular roads in October 2021.
Londoners are already doing their bit, with 4 and 5 cars already meeting the standards. But if you drive an older polluting car, light van or motorcycle, then you may be affected.
So, the best way to know if you meet the standards is to check your vehicle. Search ULEZ 2021. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
This is an important update about coronavirus. To help save lives, new national restrictions are now in place until the 2nd of December. You must stay at home. Only leave home for food, medical reasons, exercise, education, or work. You must work from home if you can, and avoid travel unless essential. Go to gov.uk/coronavirus for latest guidance and exemptions. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
The title of this
60973.
7:36, back to our conversation about the possibility of a public sector strike over a pay freeze, of course representing millions of workers in just a moment. Let's talk money now with David Buick, who's with Aquis Exchange, and talk to us about rail nationalisations, which are making some headlines this morning. David, welcome back. Good morning.
Good morning to you, Nick. Here we go round the mulberry bush again. 1948, nationalised the railways.
So that's when you retired for the first time, 1948, wasn't it?
Yeah, all right. Then, of course, Nick, privatised around 1997. And, of course, the pandemic has exposed the weakness of the whole system.
Yep.
And you have to hand it to places like France who've been, absolutely adamant that SNCF is the way forward. Well, anyway, what's happening now is that Grant Shapps, the Transport Secretary, has asked Andrew Haynes, the Network Rail Chief, to spearhead a 30-year strategy for the railways. We can't keep giving franchises here and taking them away and all the rest of it. And of course, during this lockdown, it's cost something like the lack of passenger travel £700 million a month, which when you start blocking it up with all the other areas that we've had, we're already going to borrow something like this year £375 billion. This basically has to stop. And what is whether people like it or not, and no doubt the franchise people will be furious, but we have to have a system that works for everybody. And also Mr. Haynes will be joined by Sir Peter Hendy, the Network Rail Chairman, and other key advisors to Boris Johnson, people like Polly Payne and Ruth Hammond, who've been seconded from the Department of Transport. And no doubt we'll hear fairly soon exactly what they've got to say.
Let's keep an eye on that. We need to keep an eye also on what's happening with the AA.
Well, the AA has been an absolute disaster area. I mean, it really has. I mean, they came to the public domain in 2014, I beg its pardon, and the shares got up to 416p in 2015, and they're now 33.5p, and they've got massive debts of £2.5 billion. And do you remember there was that scrap between the chairman? Yep. Slightly that with a gentleman called Mike Lloyd. Well, that's happened in 2017. And basically, we've had Albert Bridge Capital, which owns 20% of the equity, and they've had this sort of auction for the company. And it's just been an absolute mess. And anyway, there's an extension now. Other people included are Tarbrook, Norwood, Pincus. And we have until 5 p.m. tomorrow to decide how the city rules, but this one's going to run. But unfortunately, when you've got something in the current conditions that's loaded down with debt like £2.5 billion, it doesn't help.
Talk again in a little under an hour's time. Thanks to David Buick.
This is LBC. Call 0345 6060 973. Tweet at LBC. Text 84850.
In a business-related story, in an interview with The Observer yesterday, London Mayor Sadiq Khan says that he's kept awake at night with fears over the coronavirus creating an existential threat to central London. That's what keeps him awake at night, is it? 3 people fatally stabbed someone, shot in critical condition over the weekend, but he's worried about that. Some might suggest he's more of a threat to London than the business. But let's go on. Surveys have suggested people who've worked from home since March will now be reluctant to go back to their long commutes into packed city centres such as London. Separate data reveals a rise in house prices in suburbs around the city, people moving out of flats and city accommodation for more space outside London. So Mr. Carmack, my apologies, says I think we've got to accept the fact there is potentially an existential threat to central London. Are there going to be satellite type offices in outer London because people may not want to work from home? Co-working space in zones 5 or 4. Let's put this to Paul Swinney, who's Director of Policy and Research at the Centre for Cities and Non-Partisan Think Tank. Okay, look into your crystal ball. What will the future of major cities such as London do you imagine be in 10 years' time? Good morning.
Good morning. I don't think it'll look too much different to what it did back in February. If you look at a couple of trends, first is what's happened in the cities in the Far East over the last 20 years, despite increases in technologies and the threats that they've had in terms of academics and indeed things like swine flu and bird flu that they've actually had. What we're seeing out there is that people have continued to move into cities despite that threat. And the second one is if you look at what's happened in London, at least in the last 20 years, if not longer, is you're seeing these high-skilled, high-paid jobs that are based in the centre of London, clustering within there, despite the cost of doing so. So businesses are clearly seeing that there's a return to paying high rents, being based in the centre of London, and that's because of the benefits of face-to-face interaction. So because of all of that, we don't think COVID will change much.
This is really, let's just, for the purpose of our conversation, say that by this this Easter, which seems to be the soundings that we have a vaccine and a world returns to whatever the new norm will be, how soon will people start packing back on the trains and buses, do you imagine?
Well, that's a great question. I'd imagine there'll be some reluctance there, and we won't see things return back to normal straight away. And indeed, I think there are a number of companies that have said actually they don't think they're going to return till next June at least. However, I think, while there might be a bit of a lag in terms of people going back and a little bit of nervousness, I do think we will return back to close to what we saw before. Now, people might want to go back to the office, say, 3 or 4 days a week rather than 5, but I would suspect that the majority of people will go back, despite the surveys and stories I've had in recent months about people saying how much they love working from home.